All right, so for the tutorial today, we just want to go over some basics and do one standalone example about 2D arrays. Today, we're not going to touch upon any JUnit testing just yet, which will be the standard for your programming test, but we'll do that in the later exercises. Today, just going to be some console application to make the example a little bit more slightly more engaging, right? You can see something interactive. That's something we'll build from scratch. And then definitely, I don't really assume you have maybe learned about 2D arrays before. Maybe you have. Maybe it's been a while. So just remind you about the syntax about 2D arrays in Java. And then we'll try to also use a debugger just to help you whenever you want to write any program in 2D array, what you're supposed to do if you got any errors. Okay, so that's roughly the layout. We'll see. But it's going to be interactive. Any part you want me to try, you can feel free to suggest. I can try on my Eclipse as well. I will also suggest for those of you who might be using something other than Eclipse on your machine, also give a try on the exercises on the remote lab. Right? I will send you a link about the remote lab. The remote lab is going to have the look and feel for your actual programming test. So definitely get yourself familiar about the programming environments. That's highly recommended. First of all, let's see what the exercise is. And then to really solve it, we have to first of all do some quick review or introduction about 2D array. So if you go to the lecture site, and you're going to see this document here is the instruction, right? You just click on that and you will see the instruction. Okay, let's take a look at that first. Okay. Oh, by the way, no submission required for tutorial, right? I'll try to make it as self-contained as possible. You can definitely take it as an exercise you can build on your own as well. But tutorial will be part of the test or exam as well. But I'll definitely let you know before that particular test which tutorial you have to study. Okay? And this tutorial, this will be the first one, purely Java, just to get yourself warm up for the programming. All right, let's say we have a table, two-dimensional table. And that one there is really specifying about, you can see we got, let me count, Chicago, Boston, New York, Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, and Houston. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cities. Okay? So now we are trying to somehow figure out, let's say if I want to travel with some itinerary, maybe I want to go from, let's say one example, which I'm going to show to you. Let's say I want to go from Boston to New York, and then to Dallas, and then to Houston. So what will be total mileage in my itinerary? Right? A simple calculation. Of course, in order for you to figure out that particular itinerary mileage, you have to look up the relevant entries in the table. Okay, let's look at the table a little bit. And this table here actually corresponds to very closely about one way you can implement a graph, which we'll have to talk about later in the lecture. Okay, it's a very nice preview as well. So let's take a look at quickly this table here. Okay. And then I'll show you the kind of application we want you to build. Okay? So let's say, notice that this table here happens to be symmetric. What do I mean? For example, let's say if you say Atlanta to New York, the distance would be 888. Symmetrically, from New York to Atlanta will also be 888. So you can think about, let's say this part here from a city to itself is simply 0. So this triangle here corresponds to this particular triangle here, right? That's some insight into the table. All right? That's one thing to note. And then when you actually talk about, let's say, this particular itinerary, let's say we got 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 cities. Hi. Everything is good. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I figured that out. Thank you so much. Okay, yeah. So if you look at this itinerary over here, in some way you can build a graph out of this. Let me give you some idea. Okay. So here, let's say first of all we want to go from Boston to New York, right? Let's say the column over here will be the departure, and also the rows over here. Let me say it again. The rows over here. Row number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. is the departure. And then the column over here, column 1, 2, 3, 4 is the destination. Right? Let's make that convention. If I say I want to go from Boston to New York, so Boston to New York, I know that it should be 214, right? And then if I want to go to from New York to Dallas, right? So New York to Dallas right here, right? So that would be 1548, right? In case I make any mistake, please let me know, okay? And then finally, we got from Dallas to Houston. You basically go from left to right. Apparently, to process this, you need a loop, right? So go from Dallas to Houston, let's see. Dallas to Houston, it will be 239. All right, and then the answer should be the summation of these numbers. Of course, the itinerary can be arbitrarily long. And we are making an assumption, just for simplicity, for the solution. We are not going to do any error handling in this case, but you can feel free to extend it once we got a solution project. And then, so here, for example, if I enter Toronto, it should not be counted, right? There's no Toronto here, right? So that's an assumption to note. And why can this be somehow interpreted as a graph? Remember in yesterday's lecture, when we talk about the motivating problem, I kind of mentioned that if you want to calculate, let's say, the shortest path, then there's something called the weights on the edge about going from one city to into another. You have some distance as the weight, right? So that's exactly what's happening here. Let's do a little bit of visualization. Again, you can feel free to build the whole graph just for your interest, okay? Let's say for this itinerary. Let me just use B. I got Boston, and then when I connect that to New York is actually 214. Right? You can see the 214 is the weights for the edge, right? And then the next one from New York to Dallas. That would be 1548. And then from Dallas to Houston. That one there would be 239. It's only part of the graph. If you somehow try to look at all the combination between every city, you will be able to build more like a very dense graph. All right? If you want to visualize about exactly what this table is representing as a graph, you can give it a try. But for now, let's just focus on just this particular itinerary, like a sequence, like a part of the graph. Okay? Hopefully, so far, it makes sense. All right, that's Houston. Okay? So now, given this, let's see how the solution should really behave. All right? Let's see. So I will show you guys how to download the solution. If you actually go to, again, lecture site, the solution is right here. There's no starter project for this week. Okay, just go there and download that project. Okay, I already downloaded. It's right here on my desktop. Right, and you should really also you're required to actually import projects during the programming test. So this is something you have to make sure you know how to do. Very straightforward. Okay, launch the Eclipse, and of course you create some workspace. You can either say import project right here, or you can say file and then import. Okay? And then under general, existing projects into workspace, right? Might be something you pick up maybe from 2030, but might just be a while. Next, and then make sure it's not the root directory, not this option here, the second one. Select archive file, and then you'll simply browse to wherever you actually store the projects. Well, I stored it there. So usually when I make any example code available from the lecture example, it will also be like a project. So you will import in the similar way. Okay? And then you will open. Finish. Right? So that's the solution. You will see that under the source, there's only one package over here. I just named it console apps. So we are going to do some standard input and output, keyboard and also console. Okay, that's what we'll do today. Yeah, not JUnit tests just yet. Right? So you can, I'm going to go over almost every one of them, right, from scratch. Okay. But before we do any development just yet, let's now try to see how it is supposed to work. So this is the solution class ultimately we want to build. It's called mileage app 2D array. Right? It's a little bit small, the font size on the Eclipse, but anyway, so when you later on, if you refer to the recording, you'll be more visible. Okay, right click and run as Java application. All right, and then I'll maximize the console right here. All right, if you recall the itinerary we're considering here, right? Boston, New York, Dallas, Houston, right? So first of all, you have to tell the program how many cities are there in the itinerary. 4, right? You got to give a number. And then you got to enter the city one by one. Okay? So let's enter the first one. You got to spell it right, verbatim. So Boston, and then New York with a space, and also dollars, and also Houston. All right, so that would be the output. It's not really kind of interactive to keep asking you for different itinerary. You can feel free to extend it, but I think that's good enough for the session today. Right? You can see that it's actually going to figure out, first of all, exactly the different parts of the itinerary. So these are the numbers that we look up, remember manually, right? In the notes, right? And then the total distance should be this one here. That's the final answer we would like to have, right? So now you may want to think to yourself right away, how would you write a console application like that, right? So it's definitely doable by just using 1D array, one-dimensional array, which you can also use a single array list. That's also possible. But I'm going to show to you with the 2D array, it's simply going to keep your code much cleaner. So today is more like a motivation about why you should use 2D array and how to use it. Any questions so far? Okay? Okay, just hopefully everything's clear. And then I would like to start with some basics, just to make sure everybody can understand the actual solution. Why don't we do a little bit of example code about the syntax of 2D arrays in Java, and I will show you also how you can look at the internal structure of a 2D array using debugger. Okay, why don't we do that? Okay, let's do that. So I would suggest leave the solution project there, because when we try to build out the solution, I'm not going to type everything from scratch. There will be certain part I have to copy and paste from the solution, but I'll show you where to copy. Okay. So what we'll do is go to create a new project. File, new, Java projects. Right? Usually, let's say during the programming test, you don't have to create a new project from scratch. You will be given a starter project. But I would say, if you're using Eclipse on your machine, or maybe in the lab, there's only one option I will discourage you to choose. First of all, you want to type the name. Let's say EECS3101, Winter 26, tutorial, and then I'm going to say 01. Okay, whatever name you like. Okay, and then you will see that there is one option here called module. If that's the case for your Eclipse, make sure you don't click on that to create a module file. This, if you got it clicked, unclick it. Module file is not something we're going to cover. That somehow will require some extra information to be specified. So I don't think you want to get into that trouble. Right? Just make sure you don't have any module information file. But in the programming test, you don't have to worry about this kind of detail. You don't need to waste time. And then I'll say finish. All right, so that's the project. All right, and then we got a source over here. Right click, and then new package. Let's say console apps. Underscore. Yeah, Java convention for package name, you should be compound word separated by underscore, right? Kind of the basic Java knowledge. Finish. All right, good. Console apps. Okay. Let's now start with something very basic just to see the syntax for 2D array. It's actually not very difficult. You just have to understand how you can think about 2D array in terms of 1D arrays. That's something we have to develop and visualize. Let's create a new class. New, and then class. Okay. Since we're going to do console application, so we're going to need a main method to do system out, print line, etc. So there is a way to really generate some skeleton from Eclipse for you. But I'll show you. Okay. So for the first one, you cannot start the class name with a numerical value. So I cannot say 2, right? So I'm going to spell it out. Okay. 2D array app. Okay. And you can see that under what method stubs would you like to create? Click on the main method. But of course, you can type it out if you like, right? Whenever you got a main method, that means you can run it as a Java apps. And finish. All right. So now let me maximize this. All right. So we can start with this. Okay. And let's now, so there are 2 different ways for you to actually create 2D array. Let's do a little bit of paperwork, and then we'll do the Eclipse. Okay. Right here. Okay. So this is one way to actually create a 2D array. So you can think about here. Normally, if you only got this is an array. And this part tells you that every element in this array is another array. So what we are saying is, think about this one here, overall is an array. Okay, list 2. That is pointing to, but for visualization purpose, I'm going to draw this array, like a first level array, upside down. It'll be a little bit easier to see. Okay, so think about this, it's going to represent the rows. So there's going to be 3 rows because you got 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so you got here, also you got here. So 0, 1, and 2. All right, that's the first level. And then for every element in the array itself is another array. That's why it's 2-dimensional, right? So the first dimension, the blue one, is going to tell you about how many rows you have. And the second dimension is going to be about how each row is going to look like. Okay? So in this case, row number 1 is going to be an array of size 4. So that one there is going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3. And you can see row number 2 as well, row number 3 as well. Okay, so let me just copy them. Oh, actually, let me do another one. Oh, sorry. Let me just adjust that a little bit. There we go. All right. There we go. Yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so you can see that we got 3 rows. Each row has 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. In general, every row, the array for every row does not need to be of equal length. So it is possible, let's say, maybe for this array, it should be length 4. The next array can be length 3, and the next array can be length 2. It's also possible. Right? For this exercise here, we assume it's going to be more like a rectangle shape for the 2D array. Of course, there will be some utility method I'm going to assign to you, maybe for next tutorial, next Thursday. We can do some utility method for 2D array just for you to get a little bit sharper about how to process 2D array. But for now, we assume it's a rectangle. Okay? Given this, of course, let me also write down the elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, so that's the 2D array. All right, so I think once you kind of understand about this visualization here to see how 2D array can be thought of as one array of other arrays. Right, that's kind of the idea. Okay, very important thing to figure out right away since we got a diagram. Given this particular structure here, list 2, what Java syntax should I write to figure out how many rows there are in the table? What should I write exactly? Go ahead, please. Yeah, I agree. Exactly. Right? I'm asking this because this will be critical information for you to write a nested loop to process a 2D array. Right? I'm just to prepare you for that. Good. So list 2 dot length tells you the number of rows. All right. Okay. Next follow-up question is, how do I know how many columns I have? Similar. Okay. Go ahead.
List 2 and then in square brackets 0.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, since we're assuming that this is a rectangle, so we can use any of the row, right? So here we can say list 2 at index 0. Let me say index 1, right? Doesn't matter. So index 1 is really referring to this one here is really referring to this particular array. And that array can be inquired about its length as well. And that one there, you can say dot length. This would be the number of columns. And of course, the very standard way about processing the 2D array is to, first of all, go row by row in the outer for loop, and then for each iteration for the row, go column by column, right? That's something you will see, exactly. But conceptually, it's not difficult. Any questions? All good? Okay, this is good. And then let's do one more. So this is one way to actually create a 2D array if you know exactly what the content should be. Normally, once you just create this array right away, let's say the mileage table, we know that one's pretty much fixed. So we can definitely use this syntax over here. Another way to do it is to really exploit the idea about we simply got an array of arrays. What we can do is we can first of all create maybe just this array first, and then assign individual rows later. That's the second way. Let's see that right away, right? We'll talk about these two on the paper, and then we'll do Eclipse. Okay, this one here, a little bit different, but exactly the same, okay? So this one here is saying, first of all, we still declare the 2D array. That's called a list 2A, right here. And this one here, if you actually choose this second way of doing things, you must create a rectangle. You have no choice to create something other than rectangle. Yes, question?
Yeah, for the other question, I wanted to ask, what if we have different lengths for columns?
Absolutely. So that's why, okay, first of all, for this second version of syntax here, you cannot really have that. Because you got to say 3 by 4. That's it, right? 3 by 4 is got to be rectangle. Yeah. On the other hand, for the previous one, yes, you can definitely say, for example, right? You can give a try. You can say, I just remove this one here. So it's going to be only 3 columns in the second row. It's definitely fine. There might be certain usage for that as well. So if you want to go for this particular version, then you have to go for this syntax over here. Okay. Yeah, good. All right, very good. And then let's now visualize this very quickly. So once I create this, it's going to be something very similar. So this will be about how many rows, and this will be about how many columns. Okay. So it's going to point to, first of all, how many rows? We got 3 rows. 0, 1, and 2. And also we got columns. Each row we got exactly 4. Okay. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. This one here, just the same. Okay. This one here, just the same. Okay. Rectangle, for sure. You have no choice. You have no freedom about changing the dimension size. All right. So in the beginning, this is the array. And the value here will just be default. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Because integer primitive. But if you got, for example, person, like an object, it will be null, right? That makes sense. But we want to move on. We want to evolve the array to be something like this. What we should do, conceptually, we want to say rather than, well, there are different ways for you to try this. Either you can say, I'm going to change this value here. I can say, for example, list 2A, and then go to row index 0, column index 0, and then I will simply change it to be 1. Okay? It's assigned to 1. That is one way for you to actually modify gradually. That's one way. Right? But it's not really what's shown over here. Okay? Another way to do it, if you want, is you can create for each row a separate array and do the reassignments. What this one is doing, okay, I'll show it to you. So this one, we got row 1, row 2, and row 3, right? This one, each one of them is simply the 1D array. You're familiar. So we got row number 1 is going to be this array over here, right? The contents, you can fill it out, right? Row number 2 will be this array here. And also we got row number 3. Row number 3 here as well. Okay, that's actually up to this point. And then we say that, assuming that you already set out the contents accordingly. And now I'm going to say, for this array, for this table here, I'm going to change this row here to be this row, and etc. All right. So think about what's happening is this. This is step number 1. It's going to say, rather than pointing to here, it's going to point to this particular array. Okay, that's step number 1. Right? And then this one here is going to be step number 2. So rather than pointing to here, it's actually going to, oh, sorry, let me just do a little bit better. Point to the beginning of this particular array, right? That's step number 2. And this will be number 3. Rather than pointing to here, it's actually going to point to over here. Of course, you can try to reorganize a little bit to, that will be exactly this one here, right? Is that okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible to assign differently lengthed arrays to the initial array? Like we specify 3, 4, but then can we assign a 5 length array?
It's possible. You can think about, let's say this version of syntax here is giving you that. It's just a regular like array object. If you somehow change your mind, you want to change, let's say for row number 1, like row index 0. Rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, you want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just assign the, what you would do. Yeah, good question. So once we got this particular array, once we got this array object here, I'll change my mind. I can say, rather than pointing to here, I can do that and then do whatever I like, assign to a different array. This is actually some very standard operation we have to do for the graph. So you will see, right? Good. Guys, any question so far? Awesome. Okay. Why don't we just spend a few minutes to code up something very quickly, just one, and then we can take a very quick break. All right, so let's now do things quickly. Okay, and now back to this class over here. Number 1, so let's say integer. That's a 2D array. Again, it's an array over here of integer arrays. List 2 equal. All right. You can think about this as a first level array. Each row is going to be a separate array. Let's say we got 3 rows. Right, like here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. You can play with it. 7, 8. 9, 10, 11, 12. All right. So that's your first 2D array over here. But now we got to somehow look at the contents. Let's now try to see some loops to process the array. Let's just print it out. Okay. So to do that, I can simply do this. Okay. Let's just finish this one here, and then we'll take a break. And then I think that there are other parts in the solution you can definitely take a look. It just showed to you for version 2 syntax, you can also play with it the similar way. So we don't need to also repeat that, right? Just for this one. Okay. Why don't we create a utility method to process the array? So first of all, I can say system.out.println. Since I'm going to print out list 2 after initialization, right? Just make the output on the console a little bit more readable. But you can play with it. Okay. So what we'll do now is we want to create a method to handle this. Okay. So let's call the method here. Okay, let me see why I got some error over here. Let me see. Complete the body. Okay, maybe here. Okay, sorry. All right, so let's now define the method. Okay, outside the main. Because we are calling a method inside a static method, it has to be static as well, right? That's also like a Java specific detail. So I'm going to create a method here called a public static void print matrix, and then integer to the array m. Okay, right here. For now, I'm just going to make it a little bit simpler than the actual solution. I'm simply going to print out just the elements. But your little task, if you want to, before you look at the solution, is to make the output a little bit more pretty printed. You can say for each row, it's going to be surrounded by square brackets and then separated by comma. That's something you can try as well. But for now, I'm just going to print out the contents. So we're going to go row by row, column by column, right? Oh, sorry, wrong place. For integer, well, you can say I and j, or you can say r and c, r for row, and also c for column. Okay, so r will be 0, and then r less than what? Huh? List to the length. Oh, be careful, since we are now defining this utility method, right? So n, that's what you meant. List 2 will be one of them, right? Good, very good. M dot length R plus plus. So row by row. All right. We need a nested loop. For integer c will be 0, c less than. Now, what should I put? Can I simply put, for example, let me suggest something. Can I simply put n index 0 dot length c plus plus? It compiles. What's wrong with it?
It only calculates, it only prints out just the first row. It doesn't print out the rest of the...
Actually, it will print out the rest of the row. It will. How about this? Let's leave it like this. I think it's very nice. Did I touch it? Okay, I gotta stay away from that. It'll scare me. Okay, so this one actually will happen to work for this particular example actually. But let's verify that. Ah, yeah, want to say something? Yeah.
It assumes that every like row length is going to be the same.
That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. So in this case, given that we have a rectangle, so this one happened to work, but you cannot assume that for general, okay? And for now, I'm just gonna print out everything, but you gotta print it yourself, okay? All right, I wanna print out the current cell. And that one should be no surprise. And the matrix, sorry, give me one moment. Go to a particular row, R, and go to a particular column, C. Take question first.
Is it R less than M0 or is it C less than M0?
I deliberately leave it like that just for now. Okay? Yeah. Because your fellow student was wondering, is this only going to print out the first row? Right? But we're going to show that it's not. It's going to print out still everything. It'll still be correct. All right, I'm not really trying to prettify it. So, but if I try to run it, right click, run as Java application. Oh, did I print out something? Oh, sorry. One moment. System, I need to call that method. That's why. Let me do it again. Good. Sorry guys, that's my bad. Since I'm only defining method, I'm not calling it. So I should do, basically I can say to the array app dot print matrix. And then I want to print list 2. Here we talk about list 2, right? Okay, now it should be good. I do have some error over here. Let's see why. I got R and C. Give me one moment. So here I got C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But if I do here, would that actually fix it? Okay, let's just see. No, that one didn't. Okay, let me see. Array. Did I do something wrong? I'm pretty sure, right?
Doesn't C go infinitely because there's no condition that stops it?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Hey, guys, that could be an exam question. This should be C. All right? Oh, no. That's too low level. No, I promise I wouldn't do that. All right? You see what the issue is? I forgot. That's, shame on me. It should be C over there. All right? All right. So, but I still want to change it back to C. 0. There we go. All right, yeah, okay. It's nice, it's good to make errors and then we fix it together. Thank you. So this one here, you can see everything is still be printed. It's because the array happens to be a rectangle. Because here, if you actually simply check to see how many columns in the first row, it's just the same for every column. But what if the array itself has different column length for every row? In that case, it wouldn't work. So generally, the safe way to do is change this from 0 to R. All right, so that would do it. All right, right here. All right, so this is what I want to do just for now. Before we take a break, one potential exercise you can try is like this, right? Let's say given this, how can I extend what I just typed over there into, I want to pre-print into square brackets, and square brackets, comma, comma, and then 1, comma, 2, comma, 3, comma, 4, and etc. Can you actually prettify it further? Right? That would be nice, well, not really challenge. That's exercise for you to do. That's about the basics for 2D array. I think you should know, right? About the basic syntax. Any questions? Okay, why don't we take a short break? All right, so before the break, we actually covered the basics about 2D array. So let's now try to apply that and then try to see how we can use the 2D array to solve the problem, right? Okay, that's already kind of the solution, but it's okay. So remember the table that we saw over here. It shouldn't be too surprising to you that we are turning this into, implementation-wise, this 2D array right here, right? You can think about, for example, right? It's a 2D array because it's called distance, okay? That's an array of arrays. Every row over here is about a particular departure city, okay? So for example, let's say here, we are trying to departure from Chicago. Think about for this one here, it's the departure. But you will see DEP in the solution. And then we got different destination. If you, and this part here would be destination. The second dimension. This would be the destination, DST, right? That's what you will see in the solution. So for example, you will see that from Chicago, departure from Chicago to Chicago, 0. Right? It's kind of you just take no distance. From Chicago to Boston, it will be this much distance. From Chicago to New York will be this much distance, right? Etc. Right? And then you have the table right here. Of course, in the first time you have to build this table here, you got to type it out, right? No way around. But for this exercise here, we're going to copy and paste since you already got a solution code, right? I'm going to do that in a moment. Let me see anything else to talk about, right? Just make sure you understand about how to build this table here, okay? And then we are making some assumption. We are assuming that we're going to follow this particular order: Chicago, Boston, New York, etc. So we're going to somehow, based on the user is going to type in the string name for the city. The user is going to say, for example, Boston. We're going to somehow, the program is going to turn Boston into index 1. And then we're going to use 1 to index into the 2D array. You cannot use the string to index into the array. Okay, that's kind of the big picture. Let's see that. My original plan is to really go over, first of all, the ugly solution. Let's say we don't use the 2D array. We only got 1D arrays. It will still work, but the code will just be much more convoluted, right? I'll leave that as a self-study exercise for you, but I'll go directly to the cleanest version for the 2D array. So that's really what we care about this course. But I would say, as part of the tutorial review and study, also look at the 1D array version as well, right? That one's not too difficult to follow, okay? So first of all, let me tell you which one you should look at. If you go to the solution, okay, so the one we just did before the break is a 2D array app, right? That's the example we did. And then you're going to look at, there is one example file there. It's called mileage app 1D arrays. So that's the one I'm going to skip for now. So that one is the one without using 2D array. What I will do is, I'm going to go over with you about these two classes. One is about creating some utility, and the other one is about the actual app for processing the 2D array, right? These two classes, okay? And again, in the interest of time, for this class here, it's called mileage app utilities. Let me copy that, right? You can Control C, or you can simply do File, and then maybe Edit, I think. Yeah, Edit and copy, okay? Just this one, mileage app utilities. And then go back to this project here we are building, and then you can say Edit and Paste. Okay, that one I'm going to show you. Very short. It's not worth our time typing it out from scratch. Okay, that one there, let's see what it is about. First of all, you can see I'm defining some integers for us to really refer to. You can see Chicago means index 0, Boston means index 1, exactly corresponding to the index right here, right? So we're just defining them. Okay. And then we have a helper method here. Given some string, assuming that it is, well, of course, this method itself may return -1 if the city is not known to the table, for example, Toronto or Vancouver, right? But right now, given the string representing a city, we want to figure out what's the corresponding index. For example, if the user enter exactly Chicago, that means it should really correspond to Chicago index. You can see I'm not really using magic number 0, because what if I want to reorganize the cities later? All I need to do is just go back to here to modify the corresponding integers directly. Right? It's more like a software design principle, but we wouldn't have to worry, for this course. Okay. Right? Kind of see what's going on here, right? We're just given the string city, and then we want to see what's the corresponding index to index into the 2D array. All right, we're going to use this method here later, right, to really calculate what index to use. Let's say, for example, okay, very quickly, and then we'll start building the app. Okay. Let's say if the user actually say, I want to go from Boston to, let's say, Miami, for example. You cannot use these two string values as indices for the 2D array, right? What you should do is you should call the index of method. So you're going to say index of. Okay, I'll put it here. So index of Boston is going to give you 1. And then also index of Miami as well. That's going to be index of Miami. And that one there is going to give you 4. And then you're going to use these two numbers and index into the array. So you're going to go to 1 and then 4, which will give to you this number. Right? Turn from string into integer, right? Very straightforward conversion, right? You just got to use if statement. That's it. All right, let's now program this particular thing, the final solution from scratch. But there will be some copy and paste I got to do as well, but we'll see. Okay, first of all, what I need to do is I am going to copy the ones about the 2D array. So let me just do that. So if you're doing it, you can feel free to also go to the solution for the 2D array right there. All right. You can see we actually got this table here, right? The 2D array. That one is something you can just copy and paste. I'll do that in a moment. Okay, let's now create a class. So go back to the project we are building right here. Create a new class. Right click, new. Let's say mileage app. And then we're going to do the ultimate 2D array version. Okay, 2D array version. Okay, we're going to make a console application, so choose the main method as well. All right, you can see we start with empty. Because it's going to be a console application, we're going to read from the user like a keyboard. So I want to set it up, right? Again, this setup is only for console application, just for your information. You don't need it for the programming test, only for exercise. Okay. And for that one there, we're going to, first of all, we have to use a library class called scanner from Java library, right? Just type it out and import it. And then input, new, scanner. And then since it's going to be from the keyboard, it's going to be standard input. Right? I'm pretty sure you heard about standard input maybe from 2032, 2031, right? That's exactly what we're doing. And then good practice to close the input at the end right away. And then we're going to do something in the middle. All right? To start with, we should really put that mileage distance table right here using 2D array. And that one we know pretty well how to do it, given the basics we covered before the break. So I'm just copy that. Okay. So in the solution, right here, right? Let me just copy that one there. Okay, and I'll explain to you very quickly. Okay, I'll just copy. Right? So eventually, I want to have this 2D table. You can also feel free to actually say, using the second version, you can say this 2D array is assigned new 7 by 7, and then try to assign different distances accordingly, right? That's one way to go. Or what I'm doing here is more like a version 1. I basically try to create each row as an array. So I call this array here departure from Chicago. This array here will be from Boston, and etc. Right? Create 7 different arrays and then assign them as individual rows. That's what I would do. Right? You can see I got all these individual rows right here. Right? These are all the individual rows right here. And then I simply put them right here. Row number 1, row number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? Hopefully that's clear. All right, so we got a distance table. And let's now try to interact with the user. So we can now prompt them to say, how many cities are there in your itinerary? Right? We can say, in Eclipse, if you want, you can say SYSOUT, and then control space. It's going to complete it for you. Right? It's a shortcut. How many cities in your itinerary? All right, for that one there. And then we're going to read it from the user. How many? All right, we're going to use the input that we just created right here to read some integer. So we're going to say input dot next integer. So the next line, you don't need to worry, it's very low level detail. Somehow we had to consume some new line character. It's just a trick, right? You don't need to worry about exactly why. But whenever you want to mix the reading between integer and string, you have to put the new line over here. Okay, so you're going to say the next line over there, input dot next line. I put a very short line of explanation in the solution project over there. You can take a look, right? But for now, just take it for granted, right? The user is going to tell us about how many we will need, right? So what we'll do is we're going to say, accordingly, we're going to create an array about the itinerary itself, right? So string array over here, and then trip will be new string array depending on how many there are, right? How many. Right, we're going to prompt the user for as many as they like, right? But of course, it will be constrained by how many, of course. All right, so now we're going to, let's say if the how many is actually 4, that means we're going to prompt the user for 4 times. It's going to be a for loop with 4 iterations exactly, right? But if you want to make it more general, you can make it a while loop and say user can enter as many as they like until they enter quit, right? You can play with it if you want to. So you can say for integer I will be equal to 0, and then I less than how many? I plus plus. Okay, that'll be, so the number of iterations for this loop will just correspond to how long the trip is. Okay, and then we're just going to prompt the user one by one. Okay, so you can just do sys out over here. Okay, enter a city. And this user is going to say string city will be input dot next. If you want to read a string rather than integer, it will be next line. All right, and we assume whatever the user entered, there's no typo. And also it's a city that actually exists. And you can simply assign this string into the trip array, right? Very straightforward stuff about 1D array. And then will be the city. Okay, so you can think about at the end of this loop, we're going to get an array like this. For example, you can think about the trip array could be something like right here, right? Index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, right? Very good. Okay, And then after this, okay, let's say, assuming that we already got a trip. All right. So now we should really go over that one by one. Okay, what's the big picture here? Let me just do that quickly. Okay. Boston, New York. Let's say the trip array looks like this. Zero, 1, 2, and 3. Boston, New York, dollars, Houston. What we want to do is we're going to run a loop. Think about the loop counter is going to be I. I will start from 0. We're going to look at for each iteration I and also I plus 1. So it's going to be considering 0, 1, considering 1, 2, and also considering 2, 3. So that means you got to be very careful about the upper bound for I. You should not be exactly how many, right? You got to be less than how many, right? That's something you have to watch out for. 0, 1, 1 and 2, and 2 and 3. What does 0, 1 really mean? 0, 1 means we have to calculate what's the distance between Boston and New York. And 1, 2 means we want to look at what's the distance between New York and dollars. And 2, 3, what's the distance between dollars and Houston, right? That's what we're going to do. But how did we figure out Boston, New York into the corresponding index into the 2D array? Index of, which is something we just built, right? That's something we'll see. But I think the big picture is like this. We're going to go over this 1D array about the itinerary, and then we're going to figure out the distances between each connection point, and then we're going to use the 2D array distance. Okay, let's now finish the rest. So what we'll do is, we're going to accumulate the distance integer. Okay, let me just give you a little more space over here. And then we're going to say for integer I, 0, and then we're going to go over, scan through the array of trip, left to right. I less than how many minus 1. Okay, mental exercise for you. Why is this bound how many minus 1 rather than how many? Question for you, right? You got to figure it out. Okay, it should be a very easy exercise. Why not how many as the upper bound? I plus plus. And then for each one of them, you can think about here. Let's say we talk about 0, 1. I and I plus 1. I and I plus 1. I should be the departure. I plus 1 should be destination, right? And then once we're given the departure destination indices, we can index into the 2D array without any trouble, right? Let's now do that. So first of all, I'm actually going to, first of all, let's get a string. String departure city will be the trip at index I. The string for the destination city will be the trip I plus 1. Right? Just the neighbor. But we cannot use these two string values as the indices for the 2D array. We're going to convert them. And we do have the way to convert them. Remember this method we wrote before, right? Index of. We're going to use it, right? And let's go back here. So we're going to say integer departure index will be, so mileage app utilities dot index of departure. All right. And then destination. Right? We got a departure, we got a destination. Now, can anyone suggest what I should do to finish off? I only need about 1 or 2 lines of code. Go ahead. Tell me exactly what to type. How about that?
I actually have another question. I was going to double check. But
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
so for the how many minus 1, right? Is it because like if you have like 5 cities, you only get to make 4 trips? Is that one?
Put it this way, I will guide you a little bit to think about this. You want to write it down maybe on a piece of paper. Let's say how many is 4, right? So that means we got an array of length 4. The maximum index should be how many minus 1 should be 3, right? However, if you go for I and I plus 1 every time, can I be the very last index? Cannot, because I plus 1 will be just go out of boundary. So I can only be up to the second largest index, right? Okay, think about that. That's a very subtle thing, but very important. Any suggestion? All right, go ahead. Yeah? Tell me what to type, please. Yeah, I like it. Distance, but that's something we're accumulating. Very good. Plus equal, and then? Awesome. Yeah. Departure index, destination index. Thank you so much. All right. So guys, of course, this will be the goal of this exercise here. Because of the 2D array we have, we're able to do this. However, as part of your exercise, if you look into the 1D array version that's quite ugly, you cannot do this. But you will see exactly what I mean. So that will be part of the study you have to look into, just to see without 2D array, it can still work, but it's just not a pleasant way, not a very good design to do. And of course, you can simply do some intermediate, some intermediate, I beg your pardon, intermediate printout from plus departure. Yeah, for this part here, don't worry, I'm just referring to the solution. From where to where? This destination. And then that should be, of course, it would be nice to also print out the current distance, but let me just factor this out. I can say integer current distance. Okay, I can do that. And then here, I can just put the current distance here, right? Because I want to print out some intermediate result. Okay, just make sure there's no typo. That's good. And then finally, over here, I can say outside the loop, I can do distance and that'll be the final distance. Yeah, question?
What's the point of the current distance? Is it printing out on every for loop anyway?
Yeah, well, actually, okay, if you don't really have that system out of print line in 51, you don't need the current distance because I want to just show you the intermediate calculation.
Yeah, but I'm saying like why not do the original distance?
Yeah, I could, yeah, somehow just you don't want to show you can also use a local variable to capture, the lookup and then use it somewhere else. That's my main point. Yeah, of course you can use either way. Yeah, good. That's a good question. All right, I think this one should be working. Let me just, well, we can try it. If it doesn't work, that's okay. I can let you debug later. Okay, how many cities? 4. And then Boston, New York, and then dollars, Houston. Aha, good, right? It's working, right? I think that's pretty much what I want to cover. Let me recap about what we learned today. I think you want to really make sure it will be ideal if you can really try to redo this exercise over here and look at the 1D array version as well. That will also give you more insights into the array. Okay, so we actually cover entirely the Java implementation, but most importantly, what we started with is something like this, like a 2D, two-dimensional table. And this table here can somehow correspond to a graph. That's something I will need to elaborate a little bit more once we start covering the graph ADT later, right? But understand about how to go from here to something like a graph, and then how you can, like a basic syntax about Java 2D array over here, and then how you can encode this array, etc. Right? We got a few minutes, just in case you got questions. Any questions? Okay, I'll stop the recording here, but I'll stay here until the end. You can ask me questions at the front if you want to. All right, I'll see you guys next Monday.